The U.S. forces that are stationed in Europe, most of them are in Germany. What are they there for? What are they here for? Americans, not all, but many Americans from the United States will argue that we should not have forces stationed in Europe to protect Europe. We're spending a lot of money on that, and the Europeans need to defend themselves. All right, so that's one argument. And maybe there's some validity to that, I don't know. And if you look at the numbers, so during the Cold War, there were approximately, I think, a little over 300,000 U.S. service members stationed in Europe, most of them in Germany. Now, there's, I think, around 35,000 stationed in Europe, and again, most of them are in Germany. But what's their purpose? Are they here to protect Europe, or are they here to advance American goals and to support our military efforts elsewhere? And that's a big topic of conversation. A lot of some Germans I talk to, and it kind of depends on where they live, to be honest with you. If they live in the West, near a U.S. military base, most of them that you speak to, that I've spoken to, have a fairly favorable view on the American forces in Germany, and especially because thousands of Germans work directly for the U.S. military. So that's where they earn their living at, and thousands more make money off of the U.S. service members and their families. Shopping. We do a lot of shopping at German stores. Shopping, rent. A lot of Germans rent out houses to Americans. They make a lot of money from that. So closer to the American bases, from my experience anyway, not everyone of course, but Germans typically have a pretty favorable view of Americans being stationed here. Now, if you get away from these bases, and especially if you go to the former East, then the views change pretty drastically. And a lot of, or some people, I won't say a lot, but some people will say that the United States is not here to defend Europe. The United States is here to project its power and to advance its own interests, and to use these bases to conduct its operations, in Africa and the Middle East and places like that. So that's another argument. And there's also a belief that U.S. presence in Germany actually makes Europe and Germany a more likely target of attacks. They feel less safe simply because the U.S. has forces stationed here. So those are a few of the thoughts. I'm not really sure what the right answer is, but I kind of want to talk about what are we doing? Are we actually protecting Europe, or are we here to advance our own interests? All right, so Cold War. The United States had over 300,000 service members stationed in Europe. Today we have a little over 30,000. What are they here for? What is their purpose in the post-Cold War Europe? I would argue that after the end of the Cold War, the reunification of Germany, the collapse of the Soviet Union, I would argue that they've actually had very little to do with the defense of Europe. And I think for several years, the United States kind of searched for a mission for the troops stationed here. Weren't really quite sure what we're going to do with them. We built up this huge force to confront the Soviet Union, or to deter the Soviet Union, and that mission seemed to be at least somewhat successful. So I think the U.S. didn't quite know what to do. And then 9/11 came, and then our misguided invasion of Iraq, and we kind of had a reason to have troops here to support those missions. All right, so I don't know where I crossed the border at, but I think I'm in Saarland now. So it's kind of interesting. I just, at some point, I noticed the signs, some of the trail marker signs, and they've mentioned some things about Saarland. So I don't know exactly where, but apparently I am no longer in Rhineland-Pfalz. Apparently I am in Saarland. So there you go. It's pretty cool. And like, you know, and like I've said, you've heard me talk about the trail systems in Germany. You can literally walk all across the country, and here I am on this beautiful trail, and I've crossed from one federal state, the federal state of Rhineland-Pfalz, into Saarland, and it is an absolutely beautiful day here. It's pretty in Saarland too. How you like that? All right, and the other thing that I would point out that kind of makes you think that U.S. military in Germany, in Europe, you know, doesn't have much to do with the actual defense of Europe, is the fact that there's an entire organization based in Germany that has really other than my watch is going nuts here. I don't know what's going on, but other than being stationed in Germany and living in Germany, they actually have nothing to do with Germany or Europe for that matter. And this is the U.S. Africa Command, which, you know, as the name would allude to, it is dedicated on or, you know, devoted to U.S. operations and missions on the continent of Africa. And I guess the reason they're stationed in Germany, I guess because there's space available in Germany. The U.S. military has buildings available for them to operate out of, and I guess there's no adequate facilities in Africa for them to be stationed in. I'm not really sure, but yeah, there's an entire organization, U.S. Africa Command, that is stationed in Germany that is totally focused on missions in Africa. So, you know, I would say they probably have very little to do with the defense of Europe. All right, so, you know, U.S. forces in Europe, what are they here for? You know, and I think you could certainly say that, you know, since 2014, and then later, with the full invasion of Ukraine by, or attempted invasion still going on, of Ukraine by Russian forces, that yes, U.S. forces in Europe have definitely been here more of a, I guess, defense of Europe. Certainly more so than they were in the years before 2014. And I think a common thought among many people in the United States is that, well, who cares, you know? So why, even if Russia might invade, why do we care? The Europeans need to defend themselves, and they need to build their own military, and it's not really our concern, shouldn't be our concern. Well, you know, so we have, not only do we have the agreements, the NATO agreement that says we will defend those, our partner nations in NATO, but, you know, honestly, if you just look at it from a purely selfish point from the United States, the combined nations in Europe are, I believe, now a lot of stuff I say I might be wrong about, but I believe that if you combine all the nations of Europe, that would be our largest trading partner for the United States. And, you know, if Europe is completely destabilized, Russia comes in, or anyone would come in and invade Europe and destabilize the continent, then I would imagine that as our largest trading partner, or certainly one of our largest trading partners, that would have a very detrimental impact on the U.S. economy. So, you know, even if we say we don't care about NATO, we don't want to defend them, or whatever reason, for a strictly economical viewpoint, it is definitely beneficial to the United States for Europe to continue to be stable. And, you know, President Trump talks about the trade imbalance, and, you know, I'm sure he has some valid points on some of that, but, you know, I see Europeans with a lot of American products around here, and they wouldn't be buying those. You know, they use a lot of Apple computers, a lot of iPhones, you know, you see Levi jeans, you see things like that. So they do buy American products, and if their economy is totally out of balance because of military conflict and invasion, then that certainly is going to have a detrimental effect on the United States as well. All right, so I want to say thanks to those of you who have asked about Betty. She had surgery a little over 3 weeks ago, and she continues to recover, and she's doing quite well. We appreciate those of you who have asked about her and shared comments on her. So hopefully she'll be out and about with me again very soon, but we appreciate you asking about her, and she is recovering and she's doing very well. Thanks. All right, so in 1989, the year that the Berlin Wall fell or was opened, however you want to describe it, the United States had approximately 315,000 troops, service members stationed in Europe. And most of those were in what we call West Germany. Now, those numbers, they had fluctuated during the time after the Second World War, and they reached a high of almost 500 or around 500,000 in the late 1950s. But in 1989, it was around 315,000. All right, so according to an article from the website of the magazine Newsweek, and this article was published on the 14th of February this year, the United States currently has 65,745 service members stationed in Europe. And of those, 34,000 are in Germany. And of those in Germany, about 1,500 are actually assigned to the U.S. Africa Command. So they're actually in Germany, but they work on stuff affecting Africa and not things affecting Germany or Europe. There are about 12,000 service members stationed in Italy, about 10,000 in the United Kingdom, 3,000 in Spain, 1.6 thousand in Turkey. And now, for the sake of this discussion, we're going to consider Turkey as part of Europe, even though I know most of it is actually in Asia. All right, but for this talk, it's in Europe. And there's about 1,000 in Belgium. Now, these are numbers of permanently stationed service members in Europe, and they do not include what's called rotational forces. Now, these rotational forces, they were established as a response to the 2014 invasion of Crimea. And so rotational forces, these are forces that are stationed for the most part in the continental United States, but they rotate over to Europe generally for months at a time to do training exercises and different missions and things like that. So the number of rotational forces vary depending on what's going on. If there's a big training exercise, the numbers will go up. And if there's not a big training exercise, obviously the numbers go down. And so they vary from approximately 10,000 at a standard level, and they might go up to as much as 40,000 for a really big training mission. All right. So these numbers are in addition to the 65,000 that are stationed in Europe full time. Now, in addition to these U.S. service members stationed in Europe, according to the U.S. Army Europe, now this is just the U.S. Army in Europe, now they have a fact sheet that was published in March of 2021, and it says that there are 14,000 U.S. civilians that work for the U.S. Army in Europe, and there are about 9,000 local national employees from the host nations that work for the U.S. Army in Europe. And so obviously, if you include all of the branches of service, that these numbers are going to go up. But these are numbers just for the U.S. Army in Europe. All right, so we've got all these numbers. So what do they do in Europe? Okay, so the United States European Command, which is called simply EUCOM, is one of 11 unified combatant commands that the United States has created based upon either geographic or functional missions. And just for your reference, the other 10 Unified Combatant Commands are Africa Command, and which I believe may be combined with European Command. So they may take, this is what I've read, I heard somewhere that they're talking about taking the European Command and Africa Command and merging it into one command. But as of right now, they are separate. There's a European Command and an Africa Command. There's also a Central Command, which is basically encompasses the region that we refer to as the Middle East. There's Cyber Command. There's Indo-Pacific Command. There's Northern Command, which pretty much is Central and North America. There's Southern Command, which is South America. There's Space Command, Strategic Command, Transportation Command, and Special Operations Command. All right, but for this discussion, we're talking about the European Command and what is its purpose? Why does the United States have service members stationed in Europe? All right, so per the European Command website, its mission, the U.S. EUCOM's mission is to deter conflict, maintain peace and security, and provide strategic depth through military operations, exercises, and security cooperation with NATO allies and partners. The command is dedicated to proactively safeguarding the homeland while enhancing security across the Euro-Atlantic region. It is responsible for planning and executing military operations within its area of responsibility, which includes conducting joint and multinational training, providing military assistance to partner nations, and fostering military-to-military relationships with allies and partners. So that's the mission. Now the vision, U.S. EUCOM is dedicated to fostering a unified front with NATO allies and partners, delivering decisive effects across all domains. The command prioritizes maintaining peace and security through proactive measures, including military assistance, joint training, and exercises that enhance collective capabilities and readiness. The focus is on maintaining agility in a dynamic security environment, cultivating strong and strategic relationships, and ensuring forces are ready and postured to effectively address regional challenges. In collaboration with allies and partners, U.S. EUCOM aims to create a secure and stable environment in Europe and beyond. Now, just a thought. How does the EUCOM mission and vision align with the recent talk from the United States national leaders about Greenland and Denmark or Canada? So what do you think about that? So my questions for my viewers in Europe. What are your thoughts on U.S. forces being stationed in Europe? Do you think they should be there? Do you think it's time for them to go? Do you feel safer knowing that the U.S. military has troops stationed in Europe? Or do you feel it makes Europe more of a target? And for my viewers in the United States, what do you think? Is it time to get out of Europe? What does the U.S. gain, if anything, by having troops stationed there? If we close our bases in Europe, what impact would that have on U.S. operations in the Middle East and Africa? And when you consider that the combined nations of the European Union import about $370 billion worth of U.S. goods and buy billions more in U.S. services, and of course these numbers increase when you add in non-European Union members like the United Kingdom, does that make it worth it to the United States to have a stable and secure Europe? And, finally, you might say, Lee, what's the point of this? Why are we even talking about this? What's the purpose of this discussion? And I would say that, I would like to get people thinking about a topic that probably isn't as black and white as many people think it is, right? So, from my perspective, as someone who was born and raised in the United States, served for many years in the military of the United States, both in the United States and abroad, spent a lot of time in Europe. And then I've lived in Europe, lived in Germany as a civilian, totally disconnected from the U.S. military. So I feel like, I have a perspective, and that's somewhat unique. And I would like for all of us to maybe understand each other better, and to realize that there is generally more than one way to look at these situations that are affecting the world. And hopefully we can understand each other and appreciate different perspectives, right? All right, so thanks for your time. I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope it was interesting for you. And if you thought it was interesting, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. And join us next week. We'll be traveling again, and probably doing something that's not quite as controversial as talking about the stationing of military forces or military defense budgets. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye.